Don't let him drink, Emily Carter whispered. But in a court built for kings, no one listened to a rejected girl. The silver cup was already at Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood's lips, catching the chandelier light like a small, perfect moon. Around him, the obsidian court glittered with marble floors, black velvet banners, and nobles dressed as if power itself had chosen their names. Emily stood near the servants' archway with a tray trembling in her hands, her plain gray dress still damp from the cold carriage ride, her pale fingers wrapped so tightly around the handles that her knuckles had gone white. She was not supposed to speak. She was not supposed to raise her eyes. She was certainly not supposed to interrupt the most feared Alpha King in the Northern Territories during the Winter Treaty Feast. But the voice in her head was begging now, raw and fading, scraping through her thoughts like claws against locked wood. The cup. Stop him. Please. Emily's breath caught. It was not a human voice. It was deeper, older, broken by pain and distance, the voice of a wolf trying to reach her from somewhere dark. She had heard wolves before. Hurt ones. Lost ones. The ones trapped too far from help. The ones whose fear had nowhere else to go. That strange gift had never saved her from being mocked. Caleb Reed had called it madness the night he rejected her in front of their pack. The others had laughed when she said wolves could speak in silence. They had laughed until she learned to keep her mouth shut. But now, across the grand hall, Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood lifted the cup higher. His face was carved in calm, all sharp lines and cold authority, black hair shadowing his brow, amber eyes unreadable beneath the golden crown. Beside him, Madison Vale smiled with perfect sweetness, one hand resting lightly near the wine pitcher. Emily saw that smile before she understood why it made her stomach turn. The wolf in her head whimpered again. Little listener, please. He will fall. The tray slipped from Emily's numb hands. Glass chimed softly against silver. 100 faces turned toward her. Caleb, standing among the visiting pack leaders, went pale with recognition and then sneered as if he had been waiting for this moment. Don't drink it, Emily said, louder this time, her voice thin but clear enough to cross the hall. Silence dropped so hard it seemed to press against the walls. Madison's smile did not move. One councilman laughed under his breath. Caleb stepped forward, his eyes bright with cruel embarrassment. Your Majesty, forgive her. She was removed from our pack for this exact reason. She hears voices. She has always wanted attention. Heat crawled up Emily's throat, but beneath it was something colder than fear. The wolf was no longer begging. It was gasping. Alpha King Nathaniel looked at her for the first time, and the force of that gaze nearly made her step back. Not anger. Not yet. Something worse. Judgment. Emily swallowed, tasting winter air and panic. Please, she whispered. The wolf said. The hall erupted in sharp murmurs. Madison lowered her lashes, graceful as a blade hidden in silk. Caleb smiled. Nathaniel's expression hardened. Then, without looking away from Emily, the Alpha King drank. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. 1 breath. 2. 3. Then the silver cup slipped from his hand and struck the marble with a sound so small it seemed impossible that it could end a kingdom. Nathaniel Blackwood staggered once, his amber eyes flashing gold, and collapsed at the foot of his own throne. The court burst into chaos, but Emily heard only one thing. Deep beneath the shouting, beneath the rush of boots and the crackle of royal power splintering through the air, the dying wolf sighed inside her mind with terrible relief. You heard me, finally. The healers reached Nathaniel first, their white coats flashing between the black uniforms of the royal guards, but none of them could make the court breathe again. The Alpha King lay against the marble steps beneath his throne, one hand clenched near his chest, as if he were holding on to something no one else could see. His crown had rolled several feet away, stopping beside the spilled wine that now spread across the floor in a dark, shining ribbon. Emily stood frozen near the servants' archway, her empty hands hovering uselessly in front of her. Every instinct told her to run. Rejected girls did not survive being right in rooms full of powerful people who wanted them to be wrong. Caleb Reed was already staring at her, as if she had placed the cup in the king's hand herself. Madison Vale had lifted both hands to her mouth in a perfect picture of horror, but her eyes were dry, sharp, and watchful. The wolf's voice had gone faint, but it had not disappeared. Beneath the shouts and orders, Beneath the pressure of alpha power cracking through the hall like a storm trapped indoors, Emily heard a weak scrape inside her mind. North wing. Below the stones. Do not let them seal the door. Her knees nearly gave out. Below the stones. She had heard that phrase before, hours earlier, before the feast, before the cup, before the entire court looked at her, as if she were a curse wearing a servant's dress. She had been brought to Obsidian Court at dusk in the back of a supply carriage, seated between crates of winter apples and folded linens, because Caleb's pack owed the crown temporary staff for the treaty gathering. He had made certain she was chosen. She still remembered his smile when he found her in the kitchen yard, rain silvering his blonde hair, his dark coat too fine for the mud beneath his boots. Keep your eyes down, Emily, he had said softly, cruelly, so no one else would hear. Kings do not enjoy broken things staring at them. She had said nothing. Silence had kept her alive longer than pride ever had. Once, she had belonged to Silverpine Pack. Once, she had believed the strange voices in her head were a gift from the moon goddess, a secret thread tying her to creatures in pain. As a child, she had found a lost wolf pup beneath an old porch because she heard it crying from half a mile away. At 12, she had warned hunters away from a den before she ever saw the tracks. At 16, she had heard her own mother's wolf fade before the fever took her. But gifts were only called gifts when someone powerful wanted them. In Silverpine, Emily's gift became a stain. They called her unstable, soft-minded, defective. Caleb had been the worst of them because he knew exactly where to press. On the night he rejected her, he had stood before the whole pack and said he could not bind himself to a girl who confused animal noise with destiny. The laughter that followed had been quieter than thunder and somehow more damaging. Since then, Emily had learned to tuck the voices away, to answer no one, to flinch at nothing. Yet when she had entered the northern corridor of Obsidian Court earlier that evening with a basket of polished spoons, she had heard it again. Not from outside. Not from the woods beyond the palace wall. From beneath her feet. A wolf, enormous and fading, dragging each word through darkness. They locked me away from my human. Emily had stopped so suddenly the spoons rattled together. A maid behind her snapped at her to move, but Emily only stared at the black stone floor, feeling the voice rise through it like cold water through a grave. The air smelled of pine smoke, candle wax, and something metallic hidden under lemon polish. She had looked toward the sealed stairwell at the end of the corridor, where two royal guards stood with their backs too straight and their hands too close to their belts. One of them glanced at her, and the voice in her mind whispered, "Little listener, find me before the cup is raised." Now, standing in the shattered silence after the king's collapse, Emily understood the warning had never been madness. It had been a countdown. Emily did not remember deciding to move. One moment she was standing beneath the weight of 100 accusing stares, and the next she was slipping backward through the servants' archway while every eye remained fixed on the fallen king. The court was too panicked to notice one rejected girl vanish into the side corridor. Orders flew behind her. Healers called for rare herbs and silver antidotes. Guards shouted for the doors to be sealed. Madison's voice rose above them all, smooth and trembling in all the right places, telling everyone to remain calm. Emily did not trust that calm. It had edges. She pressed one hand against the cold stone wall and followed the fading voice beneath the floor. The northern corridor stretched ahead like the throat of some ancient beast, narrow and dim, lit only by blue lanterns that made the black marble shine like frozen water. Each step carried her farther from the feast and deeper into a part of the palace that smelled wrong. Not dusty, not abandoned, hidden. The air tasted of old metal, winter herbs, and a bitter ash that made her tongue sting. At the end of the hall, the two guards from earlier were gone, leaving the sealed stairwell unprotected. Emily stared at the iron lock shaped like a wolf's open mouth. It should have been impossible to open. Then the voice whispered, "Touch the left eye." Her fingers trembled as she reached up and pressed the small iron eye set into the lock. Something clicked inside the wall. The door sighed inward, and a breath of icy air rolled over her face. Emily almost turned back. She thought of Caleb's sneer, Madison's perfect smile, the king's cup striking the marble. She thought of the way everyone would blame her if Nathaniel Blackwood did not wake. Then, from below, came a sound so soft it nearly broke her. Not a growl, not a command, a plea. "Please." She descended the stairs. They spiraled for what felt like 50 feet beneath the palace, past walls carved with old wolf marks that had been scratched half away. At the bottom waited a chamber made of black stone and silver light. In the center stood a cage. Inside it lay a wolf so large that even curled on the floor, it looked like a shadow torn from a mountain. Its fur was black, but not simply black. It held faint threads of midnight blue and smoke gray, as if the night sky had been woven into it. Its amber eyes were the exact color of Nathaniel's. Emily stopped breathing. The wolf lifted its head, and the movement cost it more strength than it had. Silver chains circled the cage, glowing with a pale heat. Bowls of crushed herbs sat on the floor nearby, their sharp scent thick enough to sting her eyes. No visible wound marked the wolf, yet it looked as if something inside it was being slowly pulled apart. "You came," it said in her mind. Emily stepped closer, one careful inch at a time. "Are you his wolf?" The creature's eyes brightened, not with surprise, but with recognition. "I am the part of him they feared. I am the oath under his crown. I am the reason his enemies could not make him kneel." Emily's hand rose to her mouth. "They separated you from him." "Not fully," the wolf answered. "Not yet. But the cup will finish what the cage began." A chill moved through her so sharply she gripped the bars for balance, then pulled back when the silver warmth brushed her skin. "How do I help you?" The wolf's gaze shifted past her shoulder toward the stairs. For the first time, real fear entered its voice. "You were not supposed to be discovered this soon." Emily turned. At the top of the stairwell, slow applause echoed once, twice, 3 times, soft as falling snow and just as cold. Madison Vale stood in the doorway, her white gown untouched by dust, her smile no longer pretending to be kind. "There you are," she said gently. The little listener Caleb failed to bury. Madison's voice did not rise, and that made it worse. It floated down the stairwell with the calm sweetness of someone asking for tea, not someone standing above a secret that could break a throne. Emily backed toward the cage before she realized she had moved, her shoulder nearly brushing the silver bars. The royal wolf made a low sound in her mind, not loud enough to shake the chamber, but heavy enough to settle behind her ribs. "Do not let her touch you." Madison descended one step at a time, her white gown whispering over the stone, her pale face smooth beneath the blue lantern light. "You should be proud, Emily Carter. Most girls spend their whole lives begging for someone important to notice them. You managed it by ruining a royal feast." Emily forced air into her lungs. "You poisoned him." Madison laughed softly. "Such a dramatic word. I corrected a problem." She reached the bottom of the stairs and glanced at the caged wolf with the faint irritation one might show a stain on a carpet. Alpha King Nathaniel Blackwood was impossible to guide while that creature remained tied to him. Too strong, too stubborn, too unwilling to listen to reason. The wolf's amber eyes burned brighter, but its body stayed low, its strength trapped behind the silver glow. Emily kept her voice steady, though her hands were trembling. "He is not a creature. He is part of the king." "Exactly," Madison said, and her smile sharpened. "The part that would never choose me." The words slid through the chamber and landed like ice. Emily understood then. This was not only politics. It was hunger dressed in silk. Madison had not wanted Nathaniel's heart. She had wanted his crown, his court, his obedience, and a kingdom that would kneel when she entered the room. Emily looked toward the stairwell. If she screamed, no one would hear. If she ran, Madison would reach the feast before her. The royal wolf whispered again, weaker now. "She knows what you are." Emily turned back. "What am I?" Madison's eyes flicked to her, and for the first time, annoyance cracked through her perfect mask. "The last mistake your bloodline left behind." Wolf listeners were supposed to vanish generations ago. Too dangerous, too difficult to control. They could hear truths buried beneath every royal command. She took another step closer. When Caleb reported that his pathetic little mate heard wolves speaking from miles away, I knew exactly what had to be done. Caleb. The name struck Emily more deeply than she expected, not because she loved him still, but because some small, bruised part of her had hoped his cruelty had at least belonged to him. Madison tilted her head, reading the realization on Emily's face. "He rejected you because I told him to. He humiliated you because I paid him to. A girl no one believed was much safer than a girl the Alpha King might one day need." Emily's throat tightened, but she did not look away. You were afraid of me. The chamber went still. Madison's smile disappeared. I was careful with you. Above them, a distant crash rolled through the palace, followed by the muffled roar of voices. Nathaniel was failing. The cup had done its work. Madison turned toward the stairs, smoothing her expression back into sorrow before she even reached the first step. By the time I return to the hall, the court will know who warned the king before he fell. They will decide you cursed him. Caleb will confirm your history. The council will demand justice. And no one will ever know there was a wolf beneath their feet. Emily's pulse hammered so hard. The world narrowed. The royal wolf pressed its voice into her mind with the last of its strength. Go. Sing if you must. Bleed if you must not. But make him hear you. Madison paused halfway up the stairs and looked back. Come along, Emily. It is time to watch them blame you. Emily followed her into the cold corridor, not because she was surrendering, but because the dying wolf had given her one final truth. The court would not believe her words, so she would have to make the wolves answer instead. The corridor back to the great hall felt longer than before, as if the palace itself knew Emily was walking toward judgment. Madison moved ahead of her with graceful urgency, already wearing the face of a frightened future Luna, while Emily followed with her pulse beating in her ears and the royal wolf's last command burning through her chest. Sing if you must. She did not know what that meant. Her mother had sung old songs when storms pressed against the windows of their small cabin in Silverpine, wordless melodies that made frightened animals quiet and made Emily's strange gift settle instead of ache. But her mother was gone. Caleb had sold her shame for favor, and the only creature in the world that believed her was locked beneath a palace in silver light. When they reached the feast hall, the doors stood wide open. Inside, chaos had turned sharp and organized. Nathaniel lay on a long black table that had been cleared of crystal and winter flowers, his skin pale beneath the candlelight, his chest rising too slowly. Healers surrounded him with bowls, glass vials, and trembling hands. Dr. Evelyn Moore, the royal healer, pressed 2 fingers near his throat, her gray eyes tight with fear she was trying not to show. Beta Marcus Hale stood near the king's head, one hand braced on the table, his broad shoulders rigid beneath his dark uniform. The council had formed a ring beyond them, not close enough to help, only close enough to judge. Caleb saw Emily first. Relief flashed across his face, ugly and quick, as if her return had saved him from uncertainty. He pointed at her before anyone else spoke. There she is. She disappeared right after the king fell. The words sliced through the room. Every guard turned. Every noble leaned away as though madness could spread by breathing the same air. Madison gave a soft, broken sound and stepped to the center of the hall. I found her near the north wing, she said, careful and gentle. She was not where any servant should be. Emily looked at the spilled wine still dark on the marble, at the fallen cup now sealed inside a glass box by order of the healers, at Nathaniel's hand curled motionless against the table. The wolf below the stones was silent. Too silent. A councilman with silver hair lifted his chin. Emily Carter of Silverpine Pack, you warned His Majesty moments before his collapse. Explain how you knew. Caleb answered before she could. Because she wanted to be seen. That is what she does. She hears imaginary wolves, makes wild claims, then waits for pity. Emily's nails dug into her palms. She had survived years by swallowing words until they turned to stones inside her, but tonight the stones were too heavy. There is a wolf beneath the north wing, she said. The hall went so quiet she could hear candle wax dropping on his silver holders. He is tied to the king. Madison knows. Caleb knows. The cup was meant to finish separating them. For one heartbeat, no one moved. Then laughter broke from the council ring, short and disbelieving. Someone muttered that grief had made her bold. Caleb shook his head with practiced sorrow. This is exactly why I rejected her. She cannot tell fear from truth. Madison lowered her gaze, but Emily saw the satisfaction at the corner of her mouth. Guards stepped forward. Marcus Hale did not order them to stop. Not yet. His eyes stayed on Emily, searching, but duty held him like iron. Dr. Evelyn looked from Emily to Nathaniel, then back again, as if some piece of the impossible had brushed the edge of her mind. Nathaniel's body suddenly arched with a silent jolt, and every lantern in the hall dimmed at once. Outside the palace, beyond the high windows, a single wolf howled. Then another. Then dozens. The sound rolled over Obsidian Court like winter itself had found a voice. The guards froze. Emily felt the howl strike the hollow place behind her ribs, and beneath it, from deep under the stones, the royal wolf returned in a thread of pain. "Sing now, little listener." Emily drew in a breath. Madison's head snapped toward her. "Silence her." Two guards reached for Emily's arms. She did not fight them. She only closed her eyes and began the first note of her mother's song. The first note came out small, almost fragile, and the court nearly swallowed it. A guard's hand closed around Emily's arm. Another reached toward her mouth, and Madison's voice cut across the hall with sudden panic hidden beneath command. "Stop her." But the note did not break. It stretched through Emily's fear, thin as moonlight through frost, then deepened into the melody her mother had once hummed beside winter windows. There were no words at first, only sound. Low, aching, steady. The kind of song meant for frightened things hiding under porches, for lost pups in storms, for wolves too proud to cry where anyone could hear them. The guards hesitated. Their fingers loosened without understanding why. Nathaniel's chest rose sharply on the table. Dr. Evelyn Moore froze with one hand above a silver instrument, her eyes widening as the candle flames bent toward Emily, as if listening. The howl outside the palace changed. It was no longer scattered and wild. It gathered into rhythm, dozens of wolves answering the song in waves that rolled through the stone walls and under the marble floor. Emily kept singing. Her throat hurt. Her lungs burned. But the melody was not coming only from her anymore. Something beneath the north wing struck the silver cage with a deep, ringing sound. Once, twice, 3 times. The entire hall felt it. A crack appeared across the surface of the marble near the throne, thin and bright as lightning trapped in stone. Madison stepped back, color draining from her face. "This is a trick," Caleb shouted, but his voice shook badly enough for everyone to hear. "She is doing something to the king." Emily opened her eyes. Nathaniel was still pale, still motionless except for the slow pull of breath, but the lines of pain around his mouth had eased. The terrible pressure in the room shifted, no longer splintering outward, but turning inward, searching for its missing half. In Emily's mind, the royal wolf answered the song with a broken growl that felt almost like gratitude. "Louder, little listener. Call me home." She did. The melody rose, not pretty, not polished, but alive. It filled the spaces where doubt had lived. It slipped past the council's cold faces, past Caleb's fear, past Madison's carefully built lies, and sank into the stone under their feet. The marble cracked again. This time, the sound came from below, a great metallic snap that made every guard turn toward the northern corridor. Beta Marcus Hale drew in a sharp breath. He looked at Emily as if he were seeing not a servant, not an Omega, not a rejected girl, but a door opening where a wall had always been. "The basement," he said quietly. Madison spun toward him. "You will not leave your king." "My king is calling for his wolf," Marcus replied. Madison's expression fractured. For the first time, her beauty looked brittle, like glass left too long in freezing rain. She lifted one hand toward the nearest guard. "Take her away from him." The guard stepped forward, but before he reached Emily, a massive white wolf slammed its paws against the great hall doors from outside. The wood shook. Then another wolf joined it. Then another. The royal wolves of Obsidian Court, the ones trained to obey only the Alpha King, were not attacking. They were guarding the entrance, blocking anyone from removing Emily. Dr. Evelyn whispered, "Impossible." Emily's voice trembled, but she did not stop. The song had become a thread stretched between the table, the floor, the hidden cage, and something ancient waking inside the walls. Nathaniel's fingers moved. Just once. His amber eyes opened halfway, unfocused and burning gold beneath the lashes. The entire court fell silent except for Emily's song. Then, from the north wing, a final sound tore through the palace, not violent, but enormous, the sound of silver giving up its hold. The doors to the great hall burst inward on a blast of icy air. A black wolf the size of a small horse crossed the threshold, weak but unbowed, smoke-dark fur threaded with silver light, amber eyes fixed on Emily. Alone, every alpha in the room lowered their gaze. The wolf did not look at Madison. It did not look at Caleb. It walked past the council, past the throne, past the fallen cup, and stopped in front of the rejected girl who was still singing. Then it bowed its massive head to her feet. The royal wolf's bow changed the room more completely than any command could have. It was not submission. It was recognition. Emily felt it in the hush that followed, in the way every noble stopped breathing at once, in the way Caleb's face lost all color and Madison's perfect posture faltered as if the marble had shifted beneath her feet. The song faded from Emily's throat, leaving silence behind, and in that silence the black wolf lifted its head. Its amber eyes met hers with a terrible, ancient gentleness. You found me in the dark, little listener. Now let me return what they stole. Emily did not know how to answer. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely lift them. But when the wolf pressed its broad forehead against her palm, warmth surged through her fingers and up her arm. Not burning, not painful, only overwhelming, like standing too close to sunrise after years underground. Across the hall, Nathaniel drew a breath so deep that the candles leaped in their holders. Dr. Evelyn stepped back from the table, astonishment breaking through her professional calm. The gold in Nathaniel's eyes sharpened. His hand moved again, then closed around the edge of the black table. The royal wolf did not leave Emily's touch, but its shape began to change at the edges, smoke-dark fur dissolving into streams of silver light that flowed across the marble toward the king. The court watched the impossible happen without a single voice strong enough to interrupt it. The light reached Nathaniel's chest and sank into him like a key finding its lock. His body went still. Then his eyes opened fully. For one suspended heartbeat, he looked not at the healers, not at the council, not at Madison Vale standing rigid beside the throne. He looked at Emily. The force of his attention should have crushed her. Instead, it steadied something in the hollow place Caleb had left behind. Madison moved first. Your Majesty, she said quickly, stepping forward with tears already bright in her eyes. Thank the moon goddess. She confused the court. She touched forbidden magic. We need to secure her before she causes more harm. Nathaniel sat up slowly. The movement was controlled, but everyone could see the effort it cost him. Marcus Hale reached to help, then stopped when the king lifted one hand. Nathaniel's voice came rough, quiet, and edged with winter. Do not speak for my wolf. Madison froze. Caleb swallowed, so loudly Emily heard it from across the hall. The black wolf was no longer fully separate, but its presence remained in Emily's mind, vast and watchful. It showed her flashes, not memories as humans understood them, but truths carried in scent, sound, and feeling. Madison standing in the north wing with a silver key. Caleb bowing his head as a pouch of gold changed hands. Council seals pressed into secret letters. The wine cup placed beneath a white sleeve. Emily staggered under the weight of it. Nathaniel's gaze snapped to her. What did he show you? Emily looked at Madison, and the room seemed to tilt toward the answer. She knew the wolf was beneath the palace. She helped cage him. Caleb helped hide me from you before I ever arrived here. Caleb stepped back. That is not true. The royal wolves at the doors growled in unison, low and certain. He stopped speaking. Madison's face hardened into something clean and cold. A rejected servant's visions cannot condemn royal blood. Nathaniel stood. The entire hall lowered with him, not because anyone ordered it, but because the air remembered who he was. No, he said, but my wolf can. Madison's hand slipped toward the jeweled pin at her waist, too graceful to look dangerous, too fast to be innocent. Emily saw the flash of silver before anyone else understood. The royal wolf's warning struck her mind like thunder. Move. Emily stepped back, and at the same instant Nathaniel crossed the distance between throne and court with impossible speed. He caught Madison's wrist before the hidden blade came anywhere near its target. The room froze around them. Nathaniel's eyes burned gold, but his voice stayed calm, which somehow made it more final. Touch her again, he said, and every wolf in my kingdom will know your name as a curse. Nathaniel did not release Madison immediately. He held her wrist high enough for the entire court to see the silver pin hidden beneath the jeweled flower at her waist, its thin edge coated in a pale residue that made Dr. Evelyn draw a sharp breath. No one laughed now. No one whispered that Emily was confused. The room that had once crushed her with disbelief had become still enough to hear the winter wind press against the stained glass windows. Madison's face changed by inches, the sorrow falling away first, then the innocence, then the grace. What remained was colder and far more honest. You would take the word of a servant over the council's chosen Luna? She asked. Nathaniel's eyes did not leave her. I am taking the word of the wolf you tried to bury under my own palace. The royal wolves at the doors lowered their heads and growled, not loud, but together, a single living warning. Caleb took one step backward, then another, until Marcus Hale turned his gaze on him. The beta's expression was quiet, almost disappointed, and that made Caleb stop as if he had reached the edge of a cliff. Nathaniel looked toward the council ring. Open the North Wing records. An elderly councilman stiffened. Your Majesty, those archives are sealed by ancient law. Then ancient law can explain why my wolf was caged beneath the floor while I was handed poison in my own hall. The command settled over them with the weight of a closing gate. 2 guards moved at once, and within minutes, iron boxes were carried from the North Wing and placed before the throne. Madison's breathing changed when the first seal broke. Emily heard it. Not with magic, not with the wolf's voice, with the sharpened hearing of someone who had spent years surviving rooms where powerful people lied softly. Papers spilled across the black table. Marriage contracts, transfer orders, letters marked with council seals. A payment record bearing Caleb Reed's name. Dr. Evelyn lifted one page with careful fingers and read aloud, her voice growing colder with every line. The plan had been simple enough to be monstrous. Weaken the Alpha King by separating him from his royal wolf. Discredit any wolf listener before she could reach him. Install Madison as Lunar Regent during the king's decline. Control the border pacts through fear, grief, and law. Caleb's name appeared beside the order that had sent Emily out of Silverpine in disgrace. Madison's name appeared beside the purchase of Silver Ash. The councilman who had laughed at Emily's warning lowered his head until his chin nearly touched his chest. Caleb looked at Emily then, and for the first time since she had known him, he had no insult ready. Emily, he said, soft and desperate, I did not know it would go this far. The old wound inside her tightened, but it did not reopen. That surprised her. Perhaps some betrayal's lost power once dragged into daylight. You knew enough, she answered. The words were quiet, but every wolf in the hall heard them. Madison gave a sudden, bitter laugh. Do you think this makes her noble? She is still a rejected Omega with a strange little talent. She has no place beside a king. The last word had barely left her mouth when the royal wolf, now a shadow of silver light behind Nathaniel's shoulders, lifted its head and looked at Emily. Warmth bloomed beneath her collarbone, soft at first, then bright enough that the nearest nobles stepped back. A mark appeared there, not a wound, not a claim forced upon her, but a pale crescent threaded with gold, pulsing in time with Nathaniel's heartbeat. The wolves outside began to howl, not mourning now, but recognition. Nathaniel descended the throne steps slowly, each footfall ringing across the marble. He stopped in front of Emily, and for one breath, the entire kingdom seemed to wait inside that hall. Then the Alpha King lowered himself to one knee before the girl they had called broken. Emily forgot how to breathe. Nathaniel did not touch her without permission. He only bowed his head, black hair falling forward, his voice rough with the truth he had nearly died before hearing. Emily Carter, he said, you heard the part of me no one else could reach. You were never madness. You were the voice my wolf crossed death to. Fine. The court remained silent long after Nathaniel's words faded, as if the room itself did not know how to return to the world it had been before. Emily stood before the kneeling Alpha King with the pale crescent mark glowing beneath her collarbone, her hands still trembling, her throat aching from the song that had pulled his wolf home. For years, silence had been her shield. Now every eye in Obsidian Court waited for her to speak. Nathaniel lifted his head, but he did not rise, and that quiet choice settled something inside her more deeply than any declaration could have. He was not claiming her in front of the court as if she were a prize won from ruin. He was asking the world to see her while giving her room to breathe. Madison was taken into guarded custody by Marcus Hale, her white gown dimmed beneath the winter light, her name no longer whispered with admiration but recorded beside betrayal. The council members who had helped her were stripped of their seals before the throne. Caleb Reed stood apart from them, pale and hollow, watching the girl he had called defective become the one person the royal wolves would not stop looking at. When Marcus ordered him removed from royal protection and returned to Silverpine for judgment under pack law, Caleb looked at Emily once, searching for pity, forgiveness, anything familiar. Emily felt the old hurt stir, but it no longer owned her. She gave him neither cruelty nor comfort. She simply looked away. That was the moment he became part of a life she had survived, not a future she had to fear. By dawn, the storm beyond Obsidian Court had softened into drifting snow. The feast hall was empty of music and guests, but not of meaning. Servants moved quietly through the marble chamber, gathering broken glass, washing away spilled wine, opening tall windows to let the bitter air carry out the last traces of fear. Emily stood on the balcony outside the royal wing, wrapped in a dark wool cloak someone had placed over her shoulders without asking for praise. The palace gardens stretched below, white and still, every fountain rimmed with frost. Far beyond the gates, dozens of wolves rested in the snow like living shadows. Beneath the pine trees, Nathaniel joined her just after sunrise. He wore no crown, only a black coat, simple and severe, his dark hair loose around a face still marked by exhaustion. For a moment, he said nothing. Neither did she. The quiet between them did not feel empty. It felt like a door left open. At last, Emily asked, "What happens now?" Nathaniel looked toward the wolves below. Madison wanted a court that obeyed fear. "I will spend whatever time remains to me making certain it remembers truth." Then he turned to her, and his amber eyes softened, not with weakness, but with restraint. "As for you, Emily Carter, nothing happens that you do not choose." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the cloak. Choice was such a small word for something she had been denied so long. "And the mark?" she asked. His gaze flickered to the faint crescent at her collarbone. Careful, respectful, never lingering too long. "It means my wolf recognized you. It does not bind you without your consent. It does not make you less free." Emily looked down into the garden. The black royal wolf stepped from beneath an arch of frozen roses, no longer made of silver light, but whole, solid, and breathing beneath the morning sun. It crossed the snow with slow dignity until it stood below the balcony. Then it bowed again, not as a beast to a master, but as a guardian to the voice that had answered when no one else would. Emily felt the wolf's words bloom